Well, a very good morning to you. Thank you very much for waking up with us. This is KTN, and we are analyzing the status quo. By that I mean matters of national concern. Number 2, second in command, is a very critical office in this democracy. And now sitting in that position is Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, yet he is facing serious allegations that might see him impeached. Even as we are speaking about this, we are looking at some very serious interrogations happening in the Senate, especially after we saw this motion moved in the National Assembly. It passed by far. We're looking at numbers in the Senate that might probably not play out in the favor of the Deputy President. But looking at it in the hindsight, the Deputy President has tried not once, not twice, but 3 times with 26 petitions, 2 withdrawn, trying to get the intervention of the courts. However, this third arm of the government, the judiciary, has exercised restraint, saying they cannot interfere with the process. However, the Deputy President is allowed then to go back to the courts in case this particular process goes through, and he will be heard. Different Kenyans are sharing their thoughts in as far as this impeachment is concerned. Some thinking it's a personal way of settling scores between politicians. But that question I will also beg to understand from the experts in studio today. We have seen, and of course I'm going to bring out different things that came out yesterday. Remember, this process continues today, and we will see at the end of the day. Now, Ndegwa Njiru is one of the advocates yesterday, and I'm just going to read this to the viewer and to the guests to tell me what they thought about it. I'm reading directly. So Ndegwa Njiru asked, have you seen any interference that indicates that the Deputy President interfered with the process of maintaining the autonomy of KEMSA? This is one of the cases that came up looking at the Deputy President. And this interview or interrogation was with Dr. Andrew Mulwa, all right, holding a very key office. And this is what he said: I can't own or disown a statement that I did not make. That is what he said. He was called in as a witness, but he said, I cannot own that. And Njiru continued and said, who was interfering with the process and autonomy of KEMSA according to that statement? And Dr. Andrew Mulwa said, the Cabinet Secretary for Health. I'm just bringing in a number of things that happened in the House yesterday. Stephen, I do not know what you make of this. And he asked, what's the name of that Cabinet Secretary? And Dr. Andrew Mulwa said, not indicated. So what kind of evidence are we looking at? He is not aware. He did not make this statement. He says that the Cabinet Secretary is asked which Cabinet Secretary for that particular ministry. He says it's not indicated. But we have Cabinet Secretaries, and we have their names. We know who came before who. So Kenyans are asking if we are taking them for a ride. But what did you make of this interrogation around KEMSA, which is matters health and the lives of Kenyans who are at stake?
Yeah, I think it was a brilliant response from him. Because one, he's isolating the statement from his person or from himself. So he has to maintain that argument right through. So if he's asked which Cabinet Secretary is responsible, he cannot now name someone if that name does not appear in the documents. So he says it's not indicated. So that's a brilliant response, because had he named that person, then he'd have to answer to how do you know that that's the person that did it. So with this owning the statement, he holds true his position. Now, whether that is true or false is not for me to say, but at least he's consistent in his argument.
But do we at least expect that these are well-looked-at documents that are presented before a very credible house as the Senate, with a name that can be pointed at?
They should be.
Okay.
They should be. If you're going to accuse someone of something, then the evidence should follow and demonstrate that, in fact, this person interfered. So I don't know whether that's exhausted yet. So it's still in the process. So it's still early for us to conclude that, that goes out the window.
All right.
Yeah.
I don't know what Kenyans are thinking back at home, and as far as saying there's still time, it's still early, but we're seeing what is happening, and Kenyans are asking questions around it. Basibori, what do you think as a policy analyst? How do you think this should have played out in the first place? Because you start strong, give Kenyans confidence through it, and towards the end as well, keep the momentum.
Just to add to his observation, previously when we watched, I'm sure everybody was watching, we saw that when Ndegwa was actually cross-examining this particular witness, at some point he wanted to repudiate his own affidavit. And Ndegwa had to call upon that it's actually his own submission that he was reading is when he accepted, yes, I. Do you recall that?
That's a good point.
So then is it a process of deny, 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 and then come up with some cherry-picking kind of procedures whereby then you only agree to what suits your interest, the way that you have choreographed it? I mean, it is your affidavit. You wrote it by yourself. How come then you repudiate the whole of it until you've been called to order to be able to substantiate? So then I think then this means that there is a problem somewhere that we are not being able to analyze properly. Clearly, there's somebody pulling strings behind the curtains.
Politically?
Politically,
All
yes,
right.
for sure, because this is a political process. And like I have said previously, that, and even Honorable Pogisho has said, that all these Senate members are representatives of political parties. They have come to Parliament through a ticket, and maybe some through independent, of course, ticket, but most of them come through parties. And that, of course, the position of the party sometimes then stands. So then this begs the question then, are our members in the Senate able to cognitively look at situations? Are they well equipped to understand matters, such heavy matters as impeachment? Because sometimes it could just be sheer excitement that, you know, we are a quasi-judicial system and we are here to try the deputy president, you know. So kind of setting political scores, kind of just showing him that now we got you, you know, who is mightier at this point. Is it then a legal process whereby we're going to see procedures and evidence adduced so that we are able to then say that justice has really been served? Or is it just going to be a political process where the members of the upper house are going to be whipped just as they were whipped during Governor Mwangaza's impeachment? And I'm not talking out of nowhere, because Senator Onyonka categorically told us that that's exactly what happened. They were whipped to vote in that particular manner. So then, I don't know whether it is a problem of now the voters. Are the voters well equipped to be able to gauge the character and competence of people we send to Senate, now that we are donating this enormous power to them to be able to impeach a deputy president who was voted by 7.2 million Kenyans? Are we then saying that we are innocent bystanders in all this as voters? Because at the end of the day then, we are the people who have donated this power to them. We've given them our sovereign power to go there and act on our behalf. And we've seen time without number that most of the time they've gone against the will of the people, from how they approach the finance bill, and so many bills that we've been seeing sailing through Parliament. So then, if this voting is going to happen, are they going to look at the aspirations of the Kenyans, or are they going to look at what the political parties have told them to do?
All right. Let me hear from Honorable Pogisio here, and I want to understand first your thoughts on the KEMSA issue. And also, Mwengi Mutuse said that they had given clear evidence on the many of those grounds. However, he had considered 2 of those incidents. But he said that does not mean that they have not proved anything. I don't know what that statement means to you. And if he had considered earlier, would it make any difference in the National Assembly in as far as that, you know, those, you know, impeachment grounds or concerns around the deputy president would it have made any difference in the earlier times of this process?
That is that. I think from Mutuse, actually, he went. I think he wanted to make sure that he had enough grounds that at least one of those would probably stick, and it was important for him to try and spread the numbers so that he can get at least 1, 2. But generally, you know, the National Assembly did not have to vote on each count. They amalgamated everything and voted once. But in the Senate now they'll have to vote. It's going to be a long voting time, because fortunately they could vote, and I don't think they'll vote electronically, so they'll vote voice, so that you can clearly say who voted for what. And they have to count count 1, count 2, all the way to 11. And that will be quite a time. Mutuse almost at some point fumbled because cross-examination is not easy. Dr. Mulwa also nearly almost stumbled because he had a watertight affidavit. He thought so. And so he was reading it, and then he was being told to read it, and found out that even that did not actually seem to be as strong as he thought it was. So at some point I thought he was becoming a bit aggressive in his answers and refusing to answer or to read. But he was pushed to a corner. All these things are good for law students and for people who want to see how our law in Kenya is. I mean, internationally, we're being watched.
Right.
We're being watched, by the way, by the region, and we're being watched. This is very brilliant. No other country does this. We are in the sphere where we are entertaining the whole region. With what we're saying, with our impeachments. I mean, this is, they all watch us and they make comments about this Kenyan freedom, the freedom that we have in Kenya. But in the end, as I said, Dr. Mulo was asked, this message, how was it intimidating? You know, and I thought that was a fair question. I mean, you look at the message, and you wouldn't see, I mean, this message, how was it intimidating anybody? And again, he was asked about the minister.
Right.
And he realized that really, should he be the one in the dock? It should be the one giving this evidence, or maybe his predecessor would have been the one who did all these things. So anyway, we wish the Deputy President and his team the best. The proposal is that after they have done the arguments and the counter arguments, then Senate will retreat into what to call camera, and then they will discuss, and they will come up with, like any jury would do. They'll come up with a decision. So today, watch, enjoy the discussions, enjoy the cross-examinations and the arguments, the closing remarks or closing arguments, and then leave it to the Senate. And that's where now it is political.
It's important that I bring this up because earlier on when we saw this particular motion sponsored by Mutuse in the National Assembly, there were concerns about the speakers of that particular house and how they behaved. You know, the National Speaker, Moses Wetangula, and Gladys Shonei. I'm curious to understand, because you served in Senate, what do you make of Amason Kingi's behavior and how he has been leading this particular process so far? What are your thoughts? Is he doing well? Might he have to check a bit and tune in a bit to make sure there's a bit of fairness?
Well, the problem with the National Assembly was that the argument by Shonei, for example, is that she spoke as a member of parliament, not as a speaker. Now, that's the problem. How do you divide yourself? And yet, at the same time, she said, I will be in charge of that petition, of that impeachment myself. That means you already foresaw yourself in the seat. Anyway, the speakers, then, they were condemned, by the way. They were condemned, and at some point, I think there was a member who asked Speaker Wetangula to resign, something like that. And so the argument was that process had been interfered with. But I say again, keep saying it's a political thing. Process has been interfered with, but in the end, the same people make the decisions whether to proceed or not. Unless the courts stop them, they'll make the decision. Who is going to stop the Speaker of the National Assembly from proceeding? No one. No one can do that, or even Senate. I see the Senate Speaker at least was careful enough not to comment on the outcomes, not to comment on this. There's a desire to see the process completed. He has behaved well, relying on his members to help him with the decision, because he can't make the decision by himself. But I think he has really prepared himself well as a lawyer.
All right.
And I think he has a very good legal team that's prepared him well for this kind of impeachment. Being a first-time speaker, in my view, he has come out as a strong arbiter.
Stephen, what's your view of the Speaker of the Senate this far and how he behaved during this particular first trial, impeachment trial?
Yeah, I agree with the Honorable Pogisio in that he's conducted himself with restraint. Of course, he issued the ruling regarding interference from the courts ahead of time, but he's sending a message saying that this process is protected by law, and the courts agreed with him indirectly in the sense that they ruled accordingly. So now the issue of his conduct, I think he's doing a good job. Okay. In terms of just managing the flow of the process through the Senate. He has not shown any bias at all. However, we all know that he's also part of Kenya Kwanza, and that's his position. And this being a political process, and he will very likely, obviously, favor the party. However, he's not making the decision himself. The members are going to vote and give a decision. So I would not fault his behavior at all. He's done well so far. On the contrary, the Speaker of the National Assembly spoke before the process started, and he was trying to express perhaps that this is going to happen, it's going to go on, but it came out as if he was biased. But nevertheless, the House voted. We know exactly who voted what and how, and therefore you cannot say that the Speaker was biased necessarily. But sometimes we need to show restraint, especially when matters are as sensitive as what we're facing today.
I want to go to Bossy Bori, but I want to be particularly specific with Stephen on this particular conversation or statement that Pogisio made, that who can stop the Speaker? You see, sometimes Kenyans would underline that statement that former majority leader here said, who can stop the Speaker? Now, such statements, and if I look at the YouTube, feedback here, just questioning, because it's always a matter of, you cannot touch me. It's a political process. Now, you're going to wait until we need your voice as Kenyans or where the law comes in. But for now, we're going to disregard your feelings, your emotions, your public participation thoughts, and what you think should be good for this country, because for now, the party doesn't want this person. When he says, who can stop the Speaker? Because, fine, constitutionally there are things, but when a Speaker declares publicly that I am for this party, I will vote this way, even if the ayes don't have it, the ayes have it. Kenyans should be okay with that, really, just because it's a political process?
Yeah, I don't think that's what happened. No? If I vote yes, then the ayes have it, regardless of what the outcome is.
It's a question, it's a scenario I'm probably bringing out, if it gets there.
But the point is this. One of the biggest challenges we have is sometimes wanting to abide by the Constitution and other times wanting to be somewhat beside the Constitution. And we have this artificial existence that if someone is caught violating the law, but he's from my hometown, then wachana na yeye. Others have done that. We have to decide as a country whether we are going to be a republic governed by laws or some sort of other extra considerations. So if we look at it as it is, and that is that we are a republic governed by law, then we have to follow the law. And if the law says that the National Assembly represents the people, that we actually appointed those people through voting, then that is it. And similarly, the Senate, that's how things operate. And you can then predict outcomes based on the reality of that law. If we decide that if I don't like something that the court says, then I'm going to go and burn down the court, we have a problem. We will become an ungovernable state. So we have to stick with the law as it is. If there's something about it as established today that isn't working, we make an amendment to that. In terms of public participation, I think the process was done. From where I sit, if the Deputy President's team or supporters had waited for that process to go through with the one-day public participation, then they could have argued that there was no public participation. But by going ahead, the court found an opportunity to fix the problem by saying, bring it a little closer to the people, let all parliamentary offices remain open tomorrow, let people participate, and people actually did that. So they helped the process by going ahead of the failure to satisfactorily do public participation. Now, in terms of the National Assembly, like Honorable Pogisio pointed out, they were not required, and they're not required to vote on each item separately.
Yes.
So if someone felt satisfied that one was good for them, they agreed with the impeachment. Now, in the Senate, it's different in that you have to vote on each one, and you have to argue for each count, whether it stands or falls. But as I said earlier, even if 10 fell and 1 was sustained, the impeachment proceeds.
Right.
And so that's where the challenges are for the Deputy President.
So it's not a very easy process we're looking at. There's a lot of complexities here and there. And that's why we're saying, even at this point in time, we're still waiting once the Senate resumes to just go back, because most of these things we're discussing here is not everything that happened yesterday. We're just analyzing the day one of the trial, impeachment that is facing the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua. He was actually there in person. And a lot of Kenyans are saying that's quite a truthful man, act of humility. You saw where he sat. But we also saw a number of different remarks coming out, including this one that I'm about to read here. And how can the National Assembly approve money to renovate the Deputy President's residence and then drag the Deputy President for impeachment because of the same? I don't know, Bosibori, because, we have, they legislate, they look at the bills, they approve funds. These are questions that came up. There was an accusation of, renovating his residence, something that was not necessary, wasteful, resources. Now, this has come up, and I think this was argued by his lawyer, Ongoya. Said, you approved this money, and then you flip it on him. What do you make of that particular residential accusation?
I think it's just frivolous, because number one, the Deputy President does not allocate himself funds. They are allocated through a process that is passed through Parliament. And before that is done, there then has to be an audit on what needs to be done. Because how do we come up with a budget process, for example? How do we come up with budgeting for us to be able to know that these monies will be set aside for this particular manner of things? It's because there's a team in the ground that have gone about to assess and see what funds are required for specific instances. So for me, I think then there must have been a team to assess that situation, and it's the team that came up with itemized issues that needed to be dealt with at his residence. But that, dealt with, I think we also have a constitution that, of course, protects such kind of pronouncements. For example, we have the legal frameworks of, the Procurement Act. What does it stipulate in this manner? Who is in charge of procurement? How does it happen? Who is the accounting officer who releases the funds? Who pays? Who is the vote head? Who is the accountant? Because the Deputy President was categorical that he's not in charge of either of all those. Then I think part of the evidence that should have been backing these allegations is evidence from the accountants. Evidence from the people who had assessed the situation. If there was some manipulation, if the Deputy President asked them, for example, to inflate prices so that he can be able to get some kickbacks. But then as it looks, legally and procedurally, whatever has been done in his residence, he has nothing to do with it, because it's not his home, it's the official residence, and it's a state property.
However, Bosibori, let me bring us back to, because we follow these things when they happen. Do you remember the uproar that existed? When there was the concern that a lot of money was being either given to the first lady and certain offices of the couples, and then there was a concern about renovating State House, not just the Deputy President's residence. I think if you go in hindsight, and how Kenyans reacted to this, did you have the same reaction that you're having today after the cross-examination yesterday. Were you okay with it then? When it came up?
I questioned the priorities.
All right.
And my opinion was that as an economy that is struggling, that we are actually even struggling to pay our debts. And at this particular point in time, we know for sure that we are spending about 75% of our revenues towards debt clearance. But then, of course, I was of the opinion at that time that we have not prioritized well with our expenditures. We have not been able to see what needs to be done where, because we are still, in these issues of wastage, as if nothing is happening.
So when you spoke to that, it was in public domain. It was published, and people spoke about it.
Sure.
It was not a hidden conversation. That is when you got to actually weigh in on this matter. Let me come to Bogisio. Do you think then, because that question that was put in by the lawyer, it's like there's a setup somehow. Is it a setup? Is it a game in politics that you set a bait, you're caught by it, and then we use it against you because of some political reasons? Is it something, though, that we're going to say we will accept in the politics of this country? Is it something we should say it's normal, and then we could only clear this up in courts, but we will always set a bait when it is convenient for politicians to do that, and Kenyans should just be okay with it? Because I need clarity in as far as how politics is playing out in this process. There's a bit of confusion and complexity amidst all this.
There's a way in which our political alertness was awakened a little bit by the Gen Z demonstrations, so on. But after some time, I think we have gone back to what we would call our original settings, I guess, where we stand by and just watch as politicians. So one of the things that I fear is losing trust of the public in our institutions. And I tell you, there's something wrong when you see people keeping quiet about things that they should be voicing, keeping quiet and watching, and let it be. That attitude is both it's a defeat, but it's also a very good telling sign that people are angry. And you'll see that the people keep quiet, but they express it elsewhere. Like if you go now to the social media, they'll probably express it. But Kenyans are not able to. I think they've just allowed this thing to where we say, we let the politicians do what they have to do, and almost saying there's nothing much we can do. The Constitution in Article 1 gives the power to the people. The Article 1 actually should be our riding principle on a daily basis as we practice our institutions. For example, when the police want to arrest a citizen, they should refer to Article 1. I mean, the power belongs to this guy you are arresting. It's not just an ordinary criminal. You must realize these are the people who pay your taxes and they pay your salary. When parliamentarians take advantage of the situation, they should remember that this same person is actually the one who sustains them, even in parliament. Very soon, and I've heard this argument, very soon we're going to have probably, let's say we have a new deputy president. It's no longer the people who are going to appoint him.
All right.
They're not going to elect him. He has already been elected. Now he's going to be nominated and sort of elected now by parliament rather than back to the people. And so in a way, we need to correct that so that if the people, some kind of decision must be made by the people about whom they want next, isn't it? Whom they want. But now it's going to be a process, a limited process done by parliament, which means the people are out already. So it will be, from now on, we are back to something as if we are a parliamentary system, not a presidential system, where now parliament helps us to elect a deputy president. And that's probably why they already are calling for a special meeting, sitting on Friday. So these anticipations can be good, but if what I call the trust deficit is lowered further than this, the people will just allow us to do what we want to do and give up. They will no longer listen to what we're saying. And they'll probably just say, okay, that's what you do. And one day, I don't know, they'll just react in a very bad way. Because the anger in this country is, what is our role? What is my role? You're doing what you're doing, but what is? I am the one who put you there. So Kenyans just need to be sure that this is a political process, but they have allowed politicians to have a free hand in what they do, and there's nothing much they can do. I hope the engagement is to return Kenya to a place where we honor and respect the people who put us there, give them opportunity to direct and give guidance. Even in this vote, they should be able to speak to their senators and say, this is the way we want you to vote. Rather than the senator just saying, I'm the one who's going to do it myself because of emotion. So where are the people left in this thing?
And that's the question, because members of parliament or senators will say, I went back to my people. You know, ladies and gentlemen, follow the finance bill, finance acts. They always said, including the one that took the journalists to the streets, they said, my people. I went back at home, Honorable Pogisio, and my people said, vote yes, because they need this, that, this. Now, you have said that when we get a new deputy president, if at all this impeachment is successful, according to you, there's a very high probability that the representation in the House will not be the voice of the people. I think we need to get this closer so that we do not get the Kenyans questioning the process, because how is it so then? But members of parliament are there to represent people. We have a constitution that clearly outlines that. Yet you are saying that even so, they will be speaking for themselves. Is there no other way to engage people and truly vote to what the people have sent members of parliament to vote for? At what point do they pledge allegiance to the people?
Remember, we tried that during the public participation. It was like, go back to the people, right?
Yes.
And bring them. Now, in this particular case, it's going to be the members of parliament who are going to make this decision.
In no consultation with the people?
I think the consultation will be political parties. I think it will be what you call parliamentary groups. It will be political parties. I don't think they will go back to the people. There is no provision. And this is where we did not provide in our constitution, even in the appendices of our constitution, and that we should have actually had a way in which we go back to the people from time to time on questions as weighty as this one. And this is a very weighty situation. This is not easy. I told you, the region is watching us. They have never seen anything like this. Well, I mean, if you see the way that we have put our foot forward as a more democratic country than most of the region, they're watching us, and yet, you know, they don't know we are suffering from a situation where we are ignoring the people who put us there, because we the people, you know, we the people. I think that is a very strong preamble to a whole constitution. And so I'm not blaming the current parliament. I'm just saying there's no provision. It's not them who set up these things. It's the framers of the constitution who did this. And now it is their turn to give us a new deputy. And by the way, it's very wrong for me to speak about a new deputy without knowing the outcome of what is coming today. But there is anticipation already.
All right.
There's anticipation. By preparing Parliament for Friday,
yes,
there's already anticipation. And absolutely, because when you ask why we are coming back on Friday, they say there are some urgent matters. That's what they're going to deal with. And so what are those matters that need to be dealt with? I don't know. And I don't want to anticipate that in this particular one.
All right, Stephen, this begs the question, because I know you're Kenyans here. Before I give you, before the titles of political analysts and policy analysts, you're Kenyans. Now, here's the question. You've heard what, former majority leader in the Senate has said. And Kenyans are watching, all right? And they always ask, where is our place? NCIC spoke on Monday, and they warned the Senate. They said the manner in which we'll carry out this impeachment will either divide or unite this country, all right? Gen Zs went out on the streets and said, this is our country. We want to be involved. And then there's a constitution that as a country we already ought to have reviewed if we had to. We don't even have an IEBC. I do not know what you make of this scenario, all right? The MPs, the Gen Z said, recall members of parliament if we have. What was the argument? There's no IEBC. all these other, arguments that were coming. Now, I'm bringing this on because Honorable Pogisha said members of parliament are going to be playing center ground for the replacement of the deputy president, if any. The Kenyans are texting in and asking, so why are we being involved throughout these procedures if you can actually just come up with a replacement and we do not get to count? That's the question.
I don't know whether to call it a problem or reality, but the truth of the matter is that we delegate our authority to our members of parliament. In the matter of nominating a deputy president, it's technical to say that the deputy president was elected by 7.2 million people. Mm-hmm. And that is a true argument, mm-hmm. but it does not stand alone. That argument can be found to be lacking because when the election happens, every presidential candidate nominates a running mate.
Yes.
And they both appear on the same line when voting. So it's not a situation where you had three choices running with President Ruto and then you check off and say it is one or the other. Mm-hmm. Those two came together by nomination. So similarly, should this impeachment go through and the deputy president leaves office, mm-hmm. the president will have to nominate a deputy president. And that nomination will be examined, or that person will be vetted by parliament. There is no other way to do it. We're not going back to elections. That's the reality.
That is what the Constitution of Kenya provides for.
Yeah.
And that can, if Kenyans said they wanted to change that, would it be possible? If they said they want to review their constitution in certain areas.
It can be possible to change the constitution through amendment or through referendum. But that's a secondary process.
All right.
What's going to happen between now and Friday cannot be preempted through anticipation of a change of the constitution in the future. So the timing is for this matter to be determined right away.
The reason I'm bringing this is there have been arguments from people who are the brains behind the Constitution, and not once, not twice, have they said we have certain loopholes in our Constitution. I'm just bringing this up because every time a situation surfaces, we always go back to say, oh, this is a concern we have in the Constitution. But do we ever go back to some of these papers that were even brought to us when we had the 2000-2008 problematic elections and really implement and make sure our Constitution doesn't give loopholes for some of these things that we run back to and say, we don't have a choice. This is what the Constitution dictates, this is where we are at. Do you think it is time that Kenya thinks beyond the comfort of, it's an expensive Constitution to review?
I'd say it's expensive because
they've had that argument before.
Yes, I don't think that's a valid argument to say it's expensive. The priority to fix the laws that govern the nation. The challenge is the process. Do you do it during the next election? Do you do a referendum before? Mm-hmm. And then what are the issues? And remember that the Constitution is written, it's almost interwoven. And therefore, when you change one aspect of it affects another, you have to go back and look at that and see, oh, well, the value of what you're changing to the effect outweighs the benefits, So it requires sober consideration to make those changes. So there's also aspects of the Constitution that have not been fully implemented, that need to be implemented. So we need to probably have a very focused attention to fixing those issues within the Constitution that need fixing. But what we're facing today is a very serious matter, the potential impeachment of the deputy president and all the complexities of that issue. You asked the question about people. There's people on all sides that feel this is fair, this is not fair, he's being picked on, he deserves it. There's people on all sides. This matter will be decided on the merits of the allegations made. Right. And if they stand, then we potentially will have a new deputy president nominee.
I know, I'm looking at Posibori because you are a policy analyst and dynamics change.
For sure.
Yeah, and there are many times where, you have come out to say if we were really serious as a country and things are not working for the country, then there's need to sit down and actually work on things in a matter of priority. You said that earlier on when we started.
Yes.
But even as we are speaking, you've heard what Stephen has said. Timelines might not allow certain changes. And I'm speaking about the Constitution because everybody, including the courts, have said, in line with the Constitution, we cannot do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But when it comes to how politically things happen, they do not say, the Constitution allows us to politically impeach you because we are not happy with your remarks at Wakulima Market. We're not okay with your remarks in your mother tongue. They say he should be a symbol of national unity. Now, if you followed all this and read the grounds, in your analysis, at what point do you think the Deputy President probably came out as not a symbol of national unity? Because at some point he was interrogated and he said, I was speaking to the people in the grassroots. So it's okay then to speak my vernacular when I'm campaigning. And it's not okay now to speak in vernacular once I'm in power and I'm trying to make a point to the people. The question is, where do politicians draw the line? It is okay to campaign in your vernacular. It is not okay to speak in your vernacular after you're in power because now you're a symbol of national unity. How did you understand this particular ground of impeachment?
I totally agree that the Deputy President's conduct was unbecoming, especially when he was making these divisive and condescending statements about the country's ownership. And of course, that does not encourage social integration, cohesiveness, and inclusivity. But of course, I know that this matter of impeachment is also very weighty, especially because we have to look at what was the spirit of the Constitution? What was it envisioning? The framers of the Constitution, in their mind, what were they looking at? And for me, part of these provisions, of course, were to ensure that institutions are empowered to do the right thing according to what has been indicated within the letter and the structure of the Constitution. And I think also that at some point then, sometimes we have to relook these prerogatives, especially in the area of impeachment. Because for me, the fact that impeachment is so heavy, it should be the last line of defense. It should be used only when all other mechanisms have failed. And that all leaders of this country, including religious leaders, other political representatives, and even youth representatives have come together and said unanimously that we have tried to bring these people together, they have failed, and that the Deputy President is totally, not able to be a national figure.
I'm sorry to cut you short because we need to work. You said that we should have exhausted all conflict resolutions mechanisms, including within the party.
Yes.
But do you think a number of times the Deputy President seemed to have been warned, directly or indirectly, including there's a time the President spoke in a public forum and said, let us focus on serving all Kenyans and let us avoid ethnic politics. When you're saying that the Deputy President needs justice, but you're also saying we need to exhaust all this, conflict resolutions mechanisms. From your observation, do you think he got enough warning to the point now the impeachment motion was presented to Parliament?
For me, first, in the area of impeachment, I think this does not meet the threshold. I think the judiciary should be able to come up with stringent and complex mechanisms, especially in the areas whereby we are able to have safety valves against frivolous accusations. But talking about the conduct of the Deputy President, I agree that several times he's been warned about these pronouncements. But then let's look historically why these pronouncements were necessary to make. We know that voting in Kenya is an ethnic census. That even when coalitions are being formed and alliances, it's about the arithmetic. How many numbers are you bringing on the table? And anything about bargaining for power in that manner is in terms of numbers. And that is why when they sat down and calculated the numbers from the Western Bloc, then they apportioned ANC and the other party, Ford Kenya, 30% of ownership. And the other areas were also represented. What does this show? That also it calls upon us to also interrogate our value systems, our social systems, and our political systems. Because at the end of the day, I said that we are not innocent bystanders. We cannot just then strictly look at the Constitution without looking at what has brought us to this kind of eventuality. The fact that we are so tribal in nature that Pogisho, for him to vie, he has to go back to his area, that he cannot, call upon other people to vote for him because he comes from maybe a minority area. But then we have to then start relooking our voting patterns. That if the deputy president is incessantly calling upon this principle of marginal contribution to be looked upon when sharing of state resources, why is he doing so? Is it because of the ethnic balance and arithmetics? Is it because of his region having purportedly voted more? And why is it that the case?
All right.
Yeah. So I think then, as Kenyans, we have to have a cultural transformation. We have to inculcate the right values so that people then can be able to vote with ideology and logic, but not looking upon the tribal composition of a person. If we are able to be able to come up with such kind of metrics, then I can then for sure say that the deputy president is not in order and he should go home. But by the current status quo, we can say that to some extent, he's in order.
Ideology and reason, Samuel. You heard what she said, and you're also very big in, political good manners and hygiene. And you said that these particular members of parliament and senate are setting precedents for themselves. Now, let's talk about speaking what you can on the platform, in funerals and in churches, and being held accountable and responsible for your own remarks. Not only will the impeachment be, a precedent to refer to, but do you think it's high time that politicians realize that at any point, at any time, whatever you say cannot be thrown under the bus and say, ni siasa tu? Is that where we are at this point right now?
It's very worrying because, I don't speak for anybody in this particular impeachment. I'm not even saying we should not be guilty or not. But when the deputy president was saying all these things, if you look at the context, look at the place where he was speaking.
Yes.
And what was the mood of the people there? And there were other leaders there. But I'm just saying, why didn't anybody tell him that you can't say this in front of us?
Are we sure nobody told him?
I don't think so.
They were clapping.
Yeah. In any case, it's either they were giving him enough rope to hang himself, or it was planned all along. Because he saw the things he says in the presence of people, and the people are happy. They're happy. So I don't know whether he was being encouraged to say more and say more. But really, if we look back to the days, and I give a very good example, and I participated, and I know we have very little time. I participated in the last Mlolongo election in Kenya in 1988. And the rules of the time was, the government was a bit careful. They said, if you're going to campaign, you are not allowed to use your native language. Everybody had to use Kiswahili to campaign. And we were monitored. There was a DO there who would monitor that you don't speak your own language. And that was, I think in Kenya, if we go back to what everybody is saying in their language today, we would all be impeached.
So that particular time, that worked. And politicians were disciplined enough to speak in a language that all Kenyans would understand. It actually worked.
Yes, because before you were nominated, you had to pass a test in Kiswahili,
all right,
in English. If you didn't have it in your certificate, you had to do a test in Swahili, which I did, and somehow I passed.
Somehow.
So, but you have to do it because you have to speak in Swahili and make sure that everybody hears what you say. So I do want to come back to the point that I think Kenyans need to go back to a place where we look at the overall destruction of the country that we're causing politically. If every one of us listens to what we are saying to our people in our languages, we definitely offend other people. Definitely, we offend other people. And for this thing to happen now today, anyway, I hope some of the grounds will be thrown out because some of them, as I say, were really just frivolous.
Like which one?
I mean,
yeah, I mean it's breakfast.
Yeah, but I don't. You can actually see some of them were already even Mutusi accepted. Like the two that he said, he considered that this one not really, he doesn't have enough evidence. And he also considered that this was given to him by whistleblowers and so on, which also can become a very good case of analyzing later. The process of impeachment is a very difficult process. If we trivialize it by politicizing it, we are going to set a precedent for this country that will make it easy. And nobody knows who next is going to be impeached in this country. But you know, somehow I like the Senate because they saved some people. They managed to save the governor of Kericho the other day by just saying the preliminary objections were not good enough. So the guy was set free. Remember, it was a very small technical matter of just numbers, and he was set free. So I hope the Senate now, given that precedent, Senate will look at this one fairly and that they will actually vote independently.
The only interesting part is once you're saved, you go back to work with these people who attempted to get you out of office. We need, because when you're on one ticket, and when you nominate somebody, they're in line with your vision, they're a team you can trust. So if Deputy President then is saved, maybe by the courts, and I want to tap into your wisdom, having served in political positions, are we looking at a country that will really work appropriately? Or is it also that you can work professionally and not emotionally, or disliking each other as deputy and president, regardless?
This is a catch-22 situation. If the deputy president is saved from this, working with his boss will be almost impossible. It'll be very difficult. Trust is lost in between them. But the president is not obligated to give him any assignment. I mean, you could be deputy president and run things in your office. You don't have to work for the person, but you will still be deputy president and you finish your term properly well. I don't like that situation because then you just become a lame duck. You'll just be doing domestic things and personal things rather than using the office to do things. He can no longer be trusted and he can no longer trust. And that becomes a big problem for the nation. So sometimes you have to look at both and say, which way do we go? What sacrifice should we make? Okay. And really, if reconciliation cannot work, it's going to be a very long 3 years ahead of us.
Steve, you do realize that the deputy president actually, and I mean Rigathi Gachagua, said it in public that if there is anything that he might have done to having subordinated his boss, whom he also said has not approached him in person and said he has undermined him, then he's sorry. But he also said his apology did not mean that he was guilty and that he was sorry for those grounds that he's being, accused of. But when he's saying it's going to be difficult to work, we saw that Uhuru Kenyatta, and when he was president, and the now president, who was a deputy president, in that national breakfast, seemed to have talked about this over. It was a public apology from Ruto at that time. They finished their term, though we saw a bit of, back and forth, but he was not impeached on any grounds. Now, looking at what then would happen if the deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua, who says he will not give up his position, he will not resign, if he is saved by the courts, in your perspective, what do you think it will look like?
I think there needs to be some negotiations that take place at that point, if he's saved by the courts, or if the impeachment does not go through. And the reason I say that is because it will be an untenable situation. You'll have instances where the powers that be want to exert their authority, and as has been mentioned by Honorable Pugisio, the president can decide not to assign, and you're just sitting there doing nothing, if you will. I think the best outcome in that scenario, where he's been saved by the Senate or the courts, is to negotiate an exit package.
An exit package, okay.
Go home with all your perks and call it a day. You're not barred from running again. You can go and do your political thing. I think that would be the best outcome. But to sit around insisting on being deputy president when you know the system or the government or the president and parliament do not want you in that position would make things very difficult for everybody, including your day-to-day, everyday citizen. So that is what I would look to see happen should the impeachment not go through, in that scenario that you described.
Somebody would argue that the president himself has not come out to say, I do not want my deputy. Some would say it's the allies of the president that are pushing this impeachment motion, that are accusing Deputy President of undermining them, insubordinating them, bullying them. Some would argue that perhaps it was just a nod, but he can change his mind and work with him. You do not think that that is a possibility?
No, the president had backpedaled when there was talk. Remember, this talk about impeachment has been hanging around for a while.
Yes.
And he came out and said, mambo ya impeachment, wachane nayo. So he stopped it in that instance. Now the process has taken place. There is no opportunity for him to stop it. There's nothing he can do at this point. And then we need to look at it in terms of the law. You're being nabbed or being caught or being netted by the law. So the utterance that you make about shareholding has come back to bite you. And the engagements you've had with the county government have been seen to be contrary to the Constitution, because the national government and the county governments are supposed to work harmoniously and not opposing. And therefore, you cannot draw in the president in this process at this point, because this is the law that's being followed.
All right.
And therefore, that's where it's at. Now, are we saying that the president is not involved? No, we're not saying that. It's obvious that there's some conflict.
You gave a nod.
Yeah.
All right. Posibori, because we're looking at different analysis. What do you think, though? Because some people, we've spoken to people in the grassroots who are saying, usiguze mtu wetu, all right, if you can. And some even say, we are praying for you guys to reconcile. We hope you can still work together. We will not say that all Kenyans who are watching this morning are for the impeachment.
I think the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, he's being nipped in the bud, because he comes out as a very combatant leader, somebody who doesn't go down without a fight. So I think then he's a threat to the establishment. And then the sooner you get rid of him, the better, because if he continues being within the system, then that means things are going to be rocky between him and the powers that be. So that means then they have to deal with him right away and completely vanquish him. So then what I think then is that at the end of the day, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua was voted in together with the president with votes amounting to about 7.2 million. That is, he's within that presidency as a right. It's not a favor. He's there rightfully as a person who was voted, and he brought a huge basket of votes from his region. And of course, we know that he also contributed resources to that kitty. So for me, then, I say that Rigathi Gachagua should be given a chance to serve Kenyans. And if they think that he doesn't fit that position, then Kenyans, we should go back to Kenyans and ask them, why do you bring us these characters to serve in these serious offices? Then does it then amount to Kenyans as a whole? Do we reflect on what we want, the aspirations of the nation?
All right, saying let's go back to Kenyans. I remember the Deputy President saying, wachana na watu wa siasa, take me back to the people. Take me back to the people. No wonder that public participation. Now we want to pay our bills. That is a very short commercial break coming up, but I also want to acknowledge that the Senate is shaping up for this particular day 2 of the trial. Day 2 of the trial, and that is the live pictures from the Senate. Once this particular, hearings begin, we shall cross over live and follow. But for now, and of course you can see there, Senator Esther has just walked in among other senators. But we take a short breather, and we will then proceed after this break.